not only did I love it, but I would try to imitate it, especially the singers, Although I even remember mimicking violin lines, singing along with, it's just something about music, man. I just loved it as a little boy.
And you mentioned the Platters there, but do you recall any other artists, bands, acts that made you think this is something really special? Who were the first people that you thought this is an incredible artist?
Well, my parents played a wide variety of music. They had a couple of classical piano records by Van Cliburn playing Tchaikovsky and someone else playing Chopin, and I loved listening to that. They had K-Star, and I loved listening to that. And they had Elvis Presley and Bill Doggett, Honky Tonk. They loved that, And then my father was a huge fan of Dinah Washington and Nat King Cole and the Mills Brothers, and also the Ink Spots. So that's the kind of music that was around, while I was growing up in the 50s, and they played it all the time.
Yeah, and it's absolutely incredible, timeless music that's really stood the test of time. That's for sure. In terms of actually playing music, what was the story there? It seems like there was quite an interesting story that led you to actually taking up the playing of music.
Yeah, I was 14 years old. It was summertime, just getting ready to start high school, after summer. And the Beatles had just come out. And my brother and our friend Jody around the corner, we were going to the swimming pool. We used to go to the high school swimming pool because that's where all the girls were. And we walked through this department store, and we saw these T-shirts that were really popular with all the young men. They were kind of high-collared, tight T-shirts and all these sort of nice pastel colors. And all the young men were wearing them. We got the bright idea that we would go into the dressing room and put on 3 of them and put our shirt over it and walk out. And we got caught walking out. The manager was waiting right there, had a really short Crown career. And my dad came down and made us apologize to the store manager, and then took us home. He gave us a notebook, and he said, you're going to fill this with why you're never going to steal again as long as you live. And while you're in that bedroom, you better think of something that's going to keep you out of trouble this summer, or you're never coming out of there. And like I say, the Beatles had just come out, and we said, we want to play music, Dad. And he said, get in the car. And we got in the car and we drove to this place called Allegro Music in Fremont, California, near our house. And all the instruments were on the wall. They had a snare drum up there and a guitar and a saxophone. And I chose the saxophone and my brother chose the drums, because my father was a bartender and he worked in these places called show bars. And they had what was called at the time show bands with names like the Big Beats and the Swingin' Lads. And, they played stuff like Honky Tonk and Harlem Nocturne and Gigolo and Night Train. And they had horns, and some guys would play trumpet and sax, some guys would play clarinet and saxophone. And, they all sang, and they were really, really cool. And we used to love going to pick my dad up in the afternoon when he was getting off while they were rehearsing. And we'd sit there and watch, me and my brother, we'd watch the band. And I always thought the sax player was the coolest guy, so that's why I chose the sax. And my brother, he thought the drummer was the coolest guy, so he chose the drums. And we left that store and went home with a rented saxophone and a rented set of drums. And we started the band that day. We actually, Jody, our other friend who got caught stealing, had gotten a guitar in Mexico. He had just come back from a vacation in Mexico and gotten a guitar. And he knew how to play the intro to Pretty Woman by Roy Orbison. Dun, 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 and he knew only that, none of the rest of the song. So he would play that, and if you listen to the record, after he plays the line, then the snare comes in, hitting all four on the snare drum. And I was just there squeaking on my saxophone. And my mother came in and she said, they're going to be huge stars. And I've had a band ever since that day.
Wow. And what was the name of the first band?
The Roadrunners.
The Roadrunners. And from what I know, did you guys gig a lot? Did you play?
Well, not at first. We had to learn how to play first. I mean, we literally couldn't play. We started the band and then we learned how to play. Most people, they get an instrument, they practice for years, and they might join a band. We started the band and then we learned how to play. And but I think within a month or two, we knew like 12 minutes of music, and I got a gig playing at the high school during the afternoon lunch break out in the patio. And we just played those 12 minutes of songs over and over and over,
Do you think there's something in that though?
What's that?
Do you think there's something in that in terms of like forming the band and then learning to play? Do you think that helps keep you motivated? Because it's quite difficult if you've got nothing to practice, right? Yes,
that's a very astute observation, because I dug the band, and I quickly grew bored with the saxophone, and I wanted an organ, and my dad got me an organ. He got me a Farfisa organ. And then I saw the Animals, and they had a Vox organ, and I wanted that. He got me that. And then I grew bored with the organ, and I wanted to play guitar, and he got me a Vox guitar, So I could get bored on particular instruments, but I never got bored with music or the band, because to me, the band was so cool,
Yeah, I think it's almost essential if you are looking to progress to a professional level musically or with anything. You need to be able to put in a lot of time, and it's pretty difficult to find that motivation to put in the time required unless you've got some kind of system or some kind of support system or institution, or a band. A band, plain and simple, will just help you, or even just some live dates in the diary if you're a solo performer, just to like gear you up for it.
I think the other thing that's really key is that, being with other people making music, that forms a good musician, because you'll see people that have great facility on their instrument. They're very technically knowledgeable, but they haven't played in a lot of different band situations. And they're usually very self-centered. They want to play as many notes as they can and sound as good, look as good, sound as good as they can. But when you come up in a band environment, you realize that it's not about you, it's about the band. I mean, there's an element of it's about you, but you start to learn that, no, we need to make the band sound good,
Is it, what's the best way in a band situation to deal with people who kind of fail to understand that? I mean, I guess at a certain point, it's just not playing with them. But is that the mark of an insecure musician, do you think, when you're constantly feeling like you need to show off and not play for the song?
Well, yeah, it's simultaneously an insecure musician and an overly secure musician.
Yeah.
They just, my experience with musicians is we're all very self-centered, and some get to the place where they can work on that and achieve some modicum of unselfishness.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're saying, what's the remedy for that? The remedy is find people that don't do that, or that understand the concept of it's about a band. And sometimes, you need to teach those people, you need to show them. And that comes from just being in the band, over a period of time. I know people that have come in and at first they're like, oh, I'm playing a lick here. No, we don't need an extra lick there. We just need you to come in and play the parts and think about the band. It's about the band as a unit. It's not about you, it's about us. And they learn, and if they don't, they go find somebody else to be overly zealous about themselves.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's very true. So one of the things that's interesting about your musical development is that you learned music theory from Norman Bates, who played bass for Dave Brubeck. How helpful do you think that was in forming your musical expertise?
Well, while I was doing it wasn't helpful at all to me. I kept on asking myself, why am I doing these lessons? See, my dad got me all these teachers, you know, besides getting me all these instruments, he got me all these teachers. And so, you know, I would, like I said, I got bored really easily, you know, and so I moved on to different teachers. But my dad could see that the band was really important to me, and that it was a good thing for me. And so he asked his musician friends, you know, my son is really into this band thing. You know, I mean, he's got a band and he's really into it, and he's progressing, and he's really got a talent for it. My dad saw immediately that between my brother and me, I was the one that really had the talent. He made me be the band leader, you know. And he said, you know, what kind of a teacher? He's had organ lessons, he's had sax lessons, you know, he's had guitar lessons. What kind of a teacher? And they said, get him a theory teacher. And he didn't know what that was. He's not a musician, you know. And they said, go see this guy, Norman Bates. He's over in San Bruno and at ABC Music. And he took me over there, and Norman would, you know, he would do ear training first. He'd hit a note. He'd say, do you know what note that is? And I'd guess, you know. And then he'd he'd have me at the window looking out onto the boulevard, you know. And then he would go over there. He said, now you hit a note. And I hit a note. He'd tell me it's an F. And he was right, you know. And he goes, and he did that for me. He goes, you see what I'm trying to do? And I was like, yeah, you know. So I try, and I don't have perfect pitch, you know. But he got me acquainted with ear training. And then he would do two notes, you know. And he said, do you know what those two notes are? And I go, no. But he started explaining to me about intervals. So here's a third, a major third. Here's a minor third. He goes, what's the difference? I go, well, the minor one sounds sad. The major one sounds happy. He's right. He goes, so, and he'd play, you know, fourths, and he'd play fifths and sixths, you know, and he taught me about ear training in that respect too. And then he started teaching me about time, about counting, and also about numbers in music. So if you're in C, that C is the root, the number one. And you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you know, and he started teaching me that there's chord progressions, 1, 6, 2, 5, 1, 4, 5. You know, and he started to get me acquainted with this, but I'm a kid, you know, and to me it's like, you know, why am I doing this? And then one day I was in the garage and I had started transcribing from recordings, my favorite recordings. You know, I just go in there and because I had a good ear, I would figure out the melody, and I would figure out the chords, and I would figure out the bass line, I'd figure out the guitar part, I'd listen for the drum, I'd figure out the drum part, and I'd teach the band. And one day I'm doing that, and I realized, well, this song has the same changes as that song. And if it's in C and it's going to F, well, that's going 1 to 4, 1 to 4. And all of a sudden, it was like a light went on, you know, and I realized it's all numbers. And I was always good with math. So that made it really easy for me. And then after that, I started teaching. Like Rocco was my bass player, and I taught him numbers. You know, he didn't understand music, but I just said, from now on, instead of telling you play C, D, E, I'm going to tell you we're in the key of C, and you're going to play 1, 2, 3. And he was good with math also. You know, we started communicating that way. And then also the numbers in terms of counting became really relevant for me. You know, I could communicate with my brother on the drums that way. And then when David Garibaldi came in the band, I really got sharp in that respect, because I always wanted to mess with the beat. And so, you know, he was like, let's hit that and of 4 before 1, or let's catch the 16th before 1, or let's hang that until 2. And I was like, yeah, you know, and we just started messing with time, but always knowing where it was in the bar. So that numbers thing really helped me. And that was all Norman Bates taught me all that.
And in terms of sheet music itself, how often would you have to use that?
Um, when I was a kid, back then you could go to the music store. They had, some modern songs, and you could buy the music, and so I'd go there and figure out the chords. Back then, also, a lot of the sheet music they sold was wrong, and I realized that early on too. But I could use it like that. But in the band situation, um, mostly what I would do is I would write a chart, and I put the chords on there, but always with the guys. I'm talking in numbers, you know. But I did know how to read, but I wasn't good at it. But then years later, when we started doing recording sessions, I had to brush up on my reading, and that just came from doing it. And even today, I'm not an excellent reader, but I get my music early. I go over it, I look at it. If there's a difficult thing, I figure it out. And usually in the session, I can nail the parts pretty good.
And in terms of your advice to younger musicians, what would you say is the most important thing with regards to your musical education? Like, how would you use practice time?
I've never been one who practices. I actually started practicing recently because of this pandemic. And, I'm practicing regularly now for the first time in my life. Because when I was a kid, I didn't need to practice. I mean, all through my career, I played all the time. I was always gigging, and always playing, or had sessions, or we were rehearsing. And, so I played all the time. And I had a very bad work ethic about practice that way. Because as I say, my thing was never my instrument. People say, you should come down to the church and play your sax. I go, no, you don't want me to do that. I'm a horrible sax player. I go, my thing is I'm a band leader. I facilitate great musicians and help them play together well to make a certain type of sound, a soulful sound that we call the Tower of Power sound. That's what I'm good at. And so for me to advise somebody about practicing, all I can tell you is, look to your heroes and do what they do, and put in the time. I mean, these days, young people are, man, Lenny Pickett sent me a video yesterday of this kid. He couldn't have been more than 6 years old, just nailing it on the bass. I mean, funky and fast, like, Rocco and Jocko combined,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, man, these kids nowadays, because there's a lot more out there in terms of, if you want to learn, you go on YouTube and get lessons. You can, watch the greats really close, slow it down. And, for us, we had a record player with a 45, and I'm stopping it and putting the needle on there, and
Yeah.
so I just say, do it all, man. Whatever, access whatever's available to you, and do whatever you can to get better, and start playing with other people. That's what I tell them. I really emphasize the thing about playing with others.
If you're enjoying the Greatest Music of All Time podcast, you can keep up to date with all of our latest episodes for free by subscribing. If you're watching on YouTube, the subscribe button is located at the top of the Tom Cridland YouTube page. It's also at the bottom right of any video that you watch on YouTube. If you're listening on an audio platform, such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can subscribe at the top of the page.
And when you guys kind of became soulful, was that after seeing a kind of band in the Bay Area called the Spiders, and you then kind of turned into the Motowns? Is that the right story there?
Yeah, we were a rock and roll. When I started playing, like I said, it was about the Beatles, but even then, because of my upbringing with my parents, we grew up in Detroit till I was 11, and then came to the Bay Area. So my parents always played soulful stuff. Like I say, Nat King Cole, Dinah Washington, Bill Doggett, even Elvis Presley, I think is soulful, and I love that stuff, the Platters, all that stuff. And so I always liked the more soulful. So even when the Beatles came out, I leaned towards the Animals, and even the Stones. It was just a little more soulful, a little more hard edged, but we were doing that, and then things started to get to lean towards, people were talking about soul music, and we liked some of it. But then one day we had a gig in Hayward, California, at this place called the A Street Skate Arena. And it was a and we opened for a band called the Spiders. And I had heard about them, but I didn't know what they were like. And we played it. By then we had a saxophone player, Chuck Mendoza. And I had my alto, but I was mostly playing organ and singing. And, we would do Midnight Hour and, the Okie Doke Soul Tunes. But these guys came out, man. They played The Peak of Love, and they played Wade in the Water, and they had 3 horns, and they were really well arranged. And then they did I'm on the Outside Looking In by Little Anthony and the Imperials. And I loved that song. And their harmonies were flawless. And the lead singer, this white kid named Dennis Delacqua, he was so freaking soulful. I couldn't believe it, And that night, man, I just said that I'm going to be like that. And by this time, my dad had hired this teacher, this guitar player named Terry Saunders, to teach the whole band how to play a song. And he would come once a week and say, what do you want to learn? And we'd tell him, we dig this song, And I remember that the week before I saw the Spiders, he had got turned on to soul music big time. He said, everybody on North Beach, which is where all the topless bars were, where he worked, they were all starting to play soul music, And he said, I got to teach you this song. It's called You Don't Know Like I Know by Sam and Dave. And we're like, but we want to learn Get Off My Cloud by the Rolling Stones. He's like, no, listen to me. This is a really cool song. You're going to love it, And we're like, no, we really want to learn that one. He goes, fine. You taught us Get Off My Cloud, or you left in a huff, Well, when I saw the Spiders about 4 days later, and they did You Don't Know Like I Know, and I was like, oh my God, what did we do? And we apologized profusely to Terry the following week and said, no, we want to learn You Don't Know Like I Know. We saw this band called the Spiders. And he goes, yeah. He goes, that's what we want to be like. I go, yes. And he started teaching us, but then he had to go away. And by then I was getting more prolific at being a band leader, and I sort of took over his role.
That's really interesting. And so you then became the Motowns. What was the journey from the Motowns to
actually
Tower of Power?
We called our band the Black Orpheus as a soul playing soul music. The first time was the Black Orpheus, and then, my mother, she said, if you're going to play soul music, you should call yourselves the Motowns. You and your brother are from Detroit, and of course, Motown was the most popular music out there. And even though we didn't play a lot of Motown music, we thought that was a good idea, so we called ourselves the Motowns. And then I actually went to where the Spiders played regularly, and I got their manager to be our manager. And we just started, following them around. I became friends with all of them. I used to go to their rehearsals and watch them. And I mean, I'm watching them, my eyes like an eagle eye. I'm watching that. The guitar player, John Whitney, was really the guy that sort of taught them all what to do. And he did like what I did, And I patterned myself after him. And my idol was the singer, Dennis Delacqua, who played organ and alto sax and sang. Really soulful, and I wanted to be like him. And I tried really hard.
And how did things progress from there to changing your name to Tower of Power? And when did you guys start making original music?
Well, what happened is we started playing these soul places, like the place where the Spiders held court was called the IDES Hall. And then there were these skate arenas. There was the Roll Arena and the A Street Skate Arena. They had dances. And I saw Roger Collins there, who put out the song Looking Good. My dad told me, you need to go see this guy. And my dad also sent me to go see Sly and the Family Stone before they ever had a record. And so, I was really getting hip to soul music and places where to play. They played at Winchester Cathedral. And there were a lot of black nightclubs like the Macesmo Club and the Sportsman's Lounge and these different, and we would go there and we would get gigs. We played the Dragon A Go-Go in Chinatown in San Francisco. It was a soul music nightclub, and the Lucky 13 was an after hours joint in Albany. And these were all soul music places. And we're doing, we're starting to get a little following, and we're getting better and better, really tight, And what happened was we wanted to add another horn. And we kept on getting all these square guys from high school that like trombone. We thought we wanted a lower sounding horn. And so we were going for the trombone, but these guys are really square and they didn't get it at all. And so we had just made a decision, no more of these weird, unsoulful horn players. And I met Doc. We did a gig opening for a hippie soul band at the Alameda County Fair. They were called the Loading Zone, and they used to headline at the Fillmore Auditorium. And by now, that had become the premier venue. But we weren't that kind of band. We weren't hippies, and we wore suits and had razor cuts, and we were all these little hard guys, And but I met Doc. He was a roadie for that band, the Loading Zone, and he had just started playing the Barry sax. He was an oboe player, but he knew he dug soul music, and so he never played his soul music with the oboe, and he taught himself how to play the Barry, and he just gotten good enough where he was, looking to get a gig, and he came up to me and he said, "Man, you got a nice band, I go, "Oh, thanks." And he says, "Yeah, only one thing wrong." And I go, "Hey, what's that?" He says, "Your horn section, it needs a little bottom. By the way, I play the baritone saxophone, and I have a Selmer with a low A key. And I just heard about that horn too. They had made a high F sharp key for the tenor and alto, and they had made a low A for the baritone sax. And so I said, why don't you come by my house next week and we'll give you an audition." And I forgot to tell the guys. And when he came, this is the first hippie we ever met. And he was pretty grungy, And he came in and the guys were like, "What is this? We told you no more of these weird horn players." I said, "No, this guy's, he's got something, man. He's quirky." And he came in, he played Cold Sweat, he played Tell Mama, and he played 30, 60, 90 by the Marquis. And everybody's eyes got really big when he played. He did those low scoops. And my dad called me in, he said, "Hire this guy, he's got something." And then I did. And as soon as he came in, I'm teaching him all the parts. And he's like, one day he says, "Man, what you do, with the band?" Because by then I was changing songs around, changing the beat, changing the horn parts, changing the background vocal parts. And he said, "What you do with the band, it's amazing." He says, "Well, why are we doing everybody else's songs? Why don't we write our own?" And I said, "Okay." The idea had never occurred to me. Had he not said that to me, I don't know if I ever would have started writing, But we started writing, and the first song we wrote was "You're Still a Young Man." And by that time, as I say, the Fillmore was the place to be, and we knew we were never going to get in there wearing suits and being called the Motowns. So we were looking for a name, and we were doing some recording at this little studio in Hayward for this guy. And I was on a break, and I was sitting at the guy's desk, and there was a list of all these weird band names like Frumious Bandersnatch and Lothar and the Hand People and Strawberry Alarm Clock and 13th Floor Elevator, all these weird names, And none of those names would work for us because we were a soul band, But I looked on the list and I saw Tower of Power, And I walked out to the guys and I go, "Hey, how about Tower of Power?" And they went, yeah, that describes it. And we just took the name. And then we went and we got an audition at the Fillmore Auditorium. We were running out of places to play. All the little black nightclubs, we weren't going to go nowhere. Into the Fillmore and drove down.
Sorry, Emilio, there was a bit of a noise coming out there.
Sorry, I said we auditioned at the Fillmore, and Bill Graham signed us to our first record deal.
Wow. Yes. So, sorry to have interrupted. Is there someone moving something around, or do you reckon it's just the speaker on your laptop?
Maybe it's my chair.
Yeah. No, sorry. I just want to make sure that it's listenable and stuff. But it was only just for a minute there. So obviously that was an incredibly exciting time for you. You mentioned that You're Still a Young Man. Was that the first song that you'd written, or one of the first?
No, it's the first.
The first. And is it true that it was sort of semi-autobiographical or autobiographical?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I had fallen in love with this woman that was 6 years older than me. Nowadays, difference in ages when you're an adult is different. But as a kid, you only went out with girls your own age, but this girl was stunning, and she, for some reason, wanted to be with me, and we had a torrid love affair, and then she broke up with me, and then she, she changed her mind, and we went back together, and every time we sort of break up and go back together, she'd tell me, you need to be with girls your own age, I was like, no, I don't want to. I want to be with you, And she said, no, you're still a young man. You should. The girl's 18 years old. I was 18. She was 24. And so when we sat down to write our first song, by then it was over, But I thought, that's a good story, And so I said, what about if we write about, a girl's telling a guy that he's too young for her, and he's begging her and telling her, no, I'm not too young, And I came up with that line, you're still a young man, baby, ooh, don't waste your time. That's the girl talking to the guy. And then the guy's going, no, baby, I'm not so young, And that's how that came about.
Yeah, I mean, the best songs are often personal in nature, or, autobiographical.
Something about that song too is that we were influenced by a lot, because we were listening to an album by Curtis Mayfield and the Impressions called This Is My Country. And we loved the whole record. I mean, I was studying it. I was studying every violin part, every drum beat, every background vocal lick. I was picking it apart, And there was this one song called My Woman's Love that had this high trumpet intro. And so at the time, Mick Gillette was our trumpet player, And so that's the first thing me and Doc said. We need to write a trumpet intro like that, So the song starts with it, When we wrote that intro. And there was another tune called Bobby Taylor and the Vancouvers called Does Your Mama Know About Me? And in the middle of the song, there was a jazz waltz part. And we used that for the bridge. We said, let's change it up on the bridge and go into jazz waltz and then back to the ballad. And the other thing about that song, Does Your Mama Know About Me, was there's a part in there where the guy goes, and what about your dad? And that chord change right there, we took that change and we made it ours, And so we borrowed heavily from those two songs. And then, the intro was working so good, we said, well, let's do it again at the end, And we did.
Yeah, it's a great song. So those first two albums were obviously, a breakthrough in of themselves, and they're great albums, East Bay Grease and Bump City. But, just how much of a further breakthrough was, the Tower of Power record? Was this was quite a landmark moment in your career, wasn't it?
Well, for me, like working with David Rubinson on East Bay Grease, that was the first record he produced by himself and also engineered by himself. And he did it really fast. And I didn't know anything. I didn't know about, how you made a record. I didn't know anything about it. So I'm watching, and I'm looking. And I'm saying to myself, there's things that I would have fixed. There's things that I would have changed. And then same thing, even though the next record was with Steve Cropper, and he was a great producer, there was things that they did that I said I would do them differently, because like I said, I always patterned myself after the Spiders, and everything was really tight and really in tune. And so when we did Tower of Power, then I was at the helm, and we all produced it together, but I was the one in the control room, in the producer's chair, as it were, And I made sure that record came out sounding the way I wanted my band to sound. And then, we kind of just polished the diamond for years after that. Just kept on, upping the ante production-wise, and we learned,
Yeah, but I mean, you achieved perfection really in a way with Tower of Power. Such an amazing album, and in terms of the lyrics, particularly to What Is Hip, they're pretty funny, and like they're apt, they're witty. What was the kind of brainstorming session, creative sessions like to come up with songs like that?
Well, Doc, Doc came to me and he said, by then we had written several songs, and he said, I want to write a song called What Is Hip? And I went, what is hip? What's it about? And he goes, like everybody wants to be hip, right? I go, yeah. And he goes, but, as soon as you become hip, it's no longer hip, that thing, like in other words, you wear a certain hairstyle and no sooner do you get it and pretty soon that's not popular no more, like the mullet, and he says, so I just want to say, talk about that concept. And so we just started coming up with these lyrics, what's hip today just might become passe. You went and found you a guru in an effort to find you a new you and maybe even manage to raise your conscious level. But while you're striving to find the right road, there's one thing you should know, what's hip today just might become passe, And we just made scenarios like that. And then we wrote the chorus, and it's just like, what is hip? That's the whole, that's the hook. And then tell me if you think what is hip? If you're really hip, the passing years will show, because hipness is not a fad. Hipness is something else, and it's lasting,
Yeah. And did you think that when you'd made that album, that you'd made, a classic album for your career? Did you know how good it was?
I knew I loved it, yeah, and I feel that way about all my records, I make them that way,
Yeah, for sure.
I don't walk away until I really love it, and so, yeah, I knew I loved it, but I had no idea the impact it would have, or, it's like the song, What Is Hip, it's timeless, and it's a classic now, and, I had no idea of that when I was a young man.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not only the big tunes like So Very Hard to Go or whatever, it's a cohesive, it's a great record, as was the follow-up. How difficult was it to follow it up with Back to Oakland? Was that a painless process, making another fantastic album after that, or was it quite difficult to follow up a classic?
I wouldn't say it was difficult. We didn't think about it then. I never thought to myself, how am I going to make a record better than that one? We had great musicians and we were having fun and gigging and things were going well. And we just, put together songs and went in, and I just made sure they sounded as good as I possibly could. And for some reason I had a knack with that original soul music type of production, and by then Chester Thompson was in the band, Lenny Williams was in the band, Lenny Pickett, Bruce Conti. It was a great band. When you got musicians like that, it's easy to get great stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. And you've continued making great albums, and you've released a great new album this year, Step Up. Tell me about that. When did you record it? And what was the sort of the story behind this album and wanting to make this album?
Well, Step Up and the one before it, On the Soul Side of Town, we recorded all that music over one period of recording. We started like 7 years ago. And at first, we were just going in and out because we gig a lot, we were going in the studio here and there. But then after about 3 years, Joe Vanelli invited me to do a couple tracks at his studio. And when I went into work with him, it went really well, for one thing. And I noticed, what a great mind for production he had, how meticulous he was. I like meticulousness. I really like that. And I saw that he had that in spades. And he was super musical, really nice cat. And he's married to my business manager, so he was in the family. And by then I had realized that the project was too big for me, to do myself, and while I'm traveling and doing all these gigs. And so I asked him to help me finish it. And the idea all along, even when I first started it by myself, was to make the best albums of my career, the best album of my career. And what happened was we were going to do the Michael Jackson method, record way more than we need and pick the best 12. That was the advice of my old manager, Ron Barnett, my very first manager. He said, this is not the time to just, throw 12 songs together and put out a record. You're coming up on 50 years. It needs to be really the best record you could possibly make. And the way you do that is the Michael Jackson method. And so that was my plan. But then what happened, because we're working with Joe Vanelli, we wound up, we had 28 songs and they all sounded great, every last one of them, and by then we had a record deal, and we played it for the record company. Man, they were like, we want all of it. They wanted to put it all out at once. We didn't want to do that. So we just made 2 albums out of it, and we're very proud of both of them. And I think really, Joe Vanelli really upped the ante. I have very good production talents, but he has different types of production talents, and he pushed me, and I made a deal with myself when I started working with him. I said, no matter what he suggests, I'm going to try it. Joe's not a real great singer. His brother's fabulous, Gino Vanelli, but he's not a great singer. So sometimes when he sings ideas, they could sound kind of hokey, but I know that in his mind, he hears and sees something. And so my job is to give it a try and put my spin on it and do my best to bring his idea to fruition, like I do with all my guys. And that paid off in spades, man, because he just kept on and kept on. I had 18 tracks with these 2 girls from Sacramento singing on the back. And he said, I want to put more backgrounds, And I said, well, I don't know, those girls are up in Sacramento. By now we're in LA, He says, well, you do them. I was like, but we have girls. And he goes, we'll have girls and guys. Well, that to me was, I would have never thought of that, and I'll try it. That was the deal I made with myself. And we started adding all these parts and going in and out with girls and guys. And man, it was fabulous, and he made me sing lead on several tracks that frankly, I never would have done, and it just pushed me, and pushed everybody else too. And so I think, the combination of he and I together just made those 2 recordings really special.
Yeah, they are very special. And would you say that you fulfilled your ambition of kind of making what you consider to be your best work to date? Is that what you always look to do on a project?
Well, I think I fulfilled my mission. Whether it's the best recording I've ever made, well, that, I guess that's somebody else's decision. All I know is that, they came out really great, and I'm very proud of them. And, I didn't let them go out until I was done.
Yeah, that's it. Well, it's a good way of looking at it. So Tower of Power is not only an incredible band, it's not only Tower of Power records that you guys are famous for. It's your collaborations with others as well. And in many cases, myself included, I've learned about your work, your own albums, through your work on other people's recordings, and it's quite an astonishing list of people that you've worked with. Everybody from Otis Redding to Aerosmith to Elton John to Heart. I could go on, and I just wanted to first of all ask you specifically, because it's one of my favorite tracks, what was it like working on The Bitch's Back, because that's a pretty crucial part of the tune, and also, are there some other highlights of collaborations, features that Tower of Power have been involved in that you would highlight?
Well, before I address that, I just want to say that, there is a myth that we played with Otis Redding, and that's absolutely not true.
Is it not true?
No, it's not true. But that's the kind of thing they call that urban myth,
Yeah.
People write things, and it's just not true. We never played with them. And I was, my manager actually through one of the last gigs, the Spiders manager, the one that also managed me, he threw one of the last gigs that Otis did right before he did Monterey. He played for my manager at the Oakland Auditorium, so we were way into Otis Redding, and believe me, if I ever played with Otis Redding, I'd be shouting it from the hilltops. But
yeah.
If you're listening to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, we would really appreciate it if you were able to leave us a rating and a review. We really welcome suggestions for future guests. So when you're leaving your review, please feel free to leave the name of anyone you would love to see featured on the Greatest Music of All Time podcast.
Well, we have played with a lot of great artists, and certainly Elton John is one of them. And The Bitch Is Back, an arrangement by Greg Adams, who was our arranger for like 25 years, and also our second trumpet player, and a very, very talented arranger and a great guy. And he wrote fantastic charts on all the stuff that we recorded with other people. I mean, when we first started doing other sessions, like the first session we ever did was Nick Gravenitis, and the second one we did was Santana. We did Everybody's Everything with them. And those were head charts, because we did a lot of head charts when we were young. But when Greg came in, we started, doing more written charts because he was very good at it. And we just sort of had to soulful him up. He came out of high school stage band arrangements, and we weren't used to that type of swing sort of arranging. But he quickly grasped the soul thing. And one of the great things about Greg's arranging, he really knows the value of less is more. So that when you hear Tower of Power on somebody's record, if they allow us to arrange it, which I always insist on now, we stand out, because Greg writes it in a way that we're not in everywhere covering up all their players. I mean, if you have a band that has three great guitar players, you don't want the horns to cover up the guitars. So he just write bow, and then the guitar would be solo, and we go ba-da-bum, so whenever you heard us, it's like it stood out, and he was really good at that. And so we played with a lot of different artists, and Elton John was one of them, and that was a few days of recording. Actually, we even did tracks that weren't released, and
wow,
yeah, it was a big feather in our cap, for one, because the record was a huge hit. The album was called Caribou. And then he came to visit us when we played in London. We were on the Warner Brothers music tour, and he came to visit us. And he did a quote. We took one of his quotes from Cream magazine, where he said, he's talking about us, and he said, "They not only play great, but they look great as well." And we took that quote and we made a little brochure, and we put that quote at the top. They not only play great, but they look great as well. Elton John. And then we had each guy's picture and a list of all the instruments we played and all the artists we worked for. And we sent it out to all the record producers and artists in the industry, and just got tons of sessions,
Wow.
So that recording for Elton John was pretty integral in, making us well known. But we had already done, Santana and, other big artists.
And do you have another kind of favorite session or favorite sessions that really spring to your mind?
Well, there's two, actually. We did Spanish Moon for Little Feat. And I had heard about them because they were on the same record label, but I had no idea what kind of band they were. And I went into the date, and Van Dyke Parks was the producer, and he was a really eclectic guy. And I remember he came in, he said, he's looking at us, he says, "When you put the parts on this song, I want it to be like when the cow pie hits the barn."
Mm-hmm.
And we just kind of looked at him. I remember Greg goes, "Yeah, no problem." And we started playing, and Greg had written this chart, and the song was funky, slow funk, not like us. It was slower, but he wrote this chart. And then this guy comes in singing, man, and it was just really spooky. Lowell George. And he actually sang it down an octave while, on the track that we recorded. When he released it, he had done it different. But I was just like, wow, man, these guys are really soulful. And then we were on the Warner Brothers music tour with Little Feat. There were 6 bands, and every night we played with Little Feat. And so we started sitting in with them, and they loved it. Man, they loved it, And so they brought us in for every record they ever did. And then eventually they went to go do a live album, which is really the most famous album that we did together. It's called Waiting for Columbus. And they recorded 3 nights in Washington, D.C., Baltimore area, and 3 nights in London at the Rainbow. And, we were a featured part of that show and that recording. And I'm very proud of it. And we became very friendly with all those guys, and they were just a great band. And I'm very proud of the work we did with them.
Incredible.
And then the other act is Huey Lewis and the News. We played, the first track we did for them was a song called Doing It All for My Baby. And I should tell you about, at that time in the music business, we were not doing well. People looked at us like we were, old hat. The industry referred to us as dinosaurs, and there were all these new bands, the Motels and the Knack and Devo, bands like that. And I heard about this band called Huey Lewis and the News. And we were playing at Bill Graham's nightclub in the city. And this guy came in the back room and he was just like gushing all over us. Man, you guys sound so good. God, where did you get those songs? We were debuting some new material that we had written. And we said, we wrote them, and he goes, God, he goes, me and my band, we just love you guys, And I said, he goes, my name's Huey. And I go, Huey? I go, is your band Huey Lewis and the News? And he goes, yeah. And I go, I take the name. I always thought that was a cool name, Oh, yeah, thanks, And so sometime after that, we were doing a recording for someone at Columbia Studios in San Francisco. And Huey was across the hall and he came over and he said, hey, man, we have this song. We think it'd be really cool if you put horns on it. And up to this point, I had never heard their band, I thought they were like a new wave band, a punk band, And I went over there and it was Doing It All for My Baby, a song written by Mike Duke. And man, it was like a Sam and Dave tune. It was so soulful. And Greg did a quick arrangement on it and it came out sounding great. And we just immediately hit it off. We also did another song called Working for a Living that day. And that was more in the punk style, real up-tempo. And but Greg wrote a great horn arrangement for that. And same thing with them, we started sitting in with them when they come down to LA, because by then I had moved to LA. We would go sit in with them. We sat in with them at Magic Mountain and at the Country Club, which is a really popular rock nightclub. And they were getting bigger and bigger, And then he came to me and he said, because he put out The Heart of Rock and Roll. And he had that song, I Want a New Drug, and it was climbing up the chart. And he came and he said, would you go out on the road with us? And we were broke, we weren't doing well. And, but anyway, I had the band, I told him, I said, I can't, I got the band. And he said, well, is there any way you can work it out, man? We're ringing the bell now, And so I got an idea and I said, you know what? I said, I'll do it if you make me a couple of promises. He goes, what's that? I said, I want you to promote Tower Power in every interview that you do. I want you to feature us really prominently and mention us by name every show. And I want you to let me bring the band out to the big cities where you play and let us do midnight shows there. And you announce it at the arena and say that you're coming down to sit in with us, because they like to sit in with us. By then they had done that a few times. And he goes, deal. And we did that, and they paid us a lot of money, and we used that money to hire a publicist. And we just he really helped us resurrect our career. And he was true to his word. He promoted us at every turn, and we started writing together. And we'd be playing in New York City at Jones Beach, and then midnight show, Tower of Power at the bottom line, he'd announce it to 18,000 people and say, we're all going down to party with Tower of Power. We're going to sit in with them tonight at midnight at the bottom line. The place would be besieged with people, And so things started really picking up for us. And We did all the rest of his records. And it was a great relationship. He wound up recording a song that I wrote called "Simple as That," and I just very proud of my work that we did together.
Yeah. Huey Lewis and Huey Lewis on the News. He's one of the greats in my opinion. I think he's one of the best artists from the 80s. I absolutely love that music. It's absolutely brilliant music, incredible, and a nice and seems like a nice guy as well. Emilio,
Great.
thank you so much for taking the time to come on the Greatest Music of All Time podcast, and of course for making some of the greatest music of all time. So that's 2 counts on which we have to thank you. I hope you have a great holiday season, and yeah, I'm very pleased that we managed to record this episode this time in full. It will be out probably later today or tomorrow. And yeah, thanks again. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome, and Merry Christmas to you. I make sure everybody knows Christ is the reason for the season. So I don't say Happy Holidays. I say Merry Christmas.
I'm glad that you say that. I can't believe we're living in times where I have to say holiday season. It actually really pisses me off, to be honest. So Merry Christmas. Well, what?
I said they can shoot me and arrest me if they want, but I'm saying Merry Christmas.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to actually start doing that as well. You've inspired me, Emilio. So Merry Christmas to you. All power to that. Bye.
Hi, I'm Tom Cridland, and I'm the host of the Greatest Music of All Time podcast. Alongside having conversations with our amazing guests on the show, I am a singer-songwriter on a mission to make rock and roll great again. I'm really inspired by the sounds of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, people like the Beatles, Elton John, and Phil Collins, and my mission is to create new music that's as melodic and timeless as the songs by these legends. You can listen to my songs on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, and just about any other streaming service. If you'd like to see me live, I will be supporting the Stylistics on their UK tour in 2021. Now, on with the show.